everyone. So for my lesson plan, I chose to do Matchbox car ramps with my students. So this activity was a culmination of our Force and Motion unit in first grade. I designed this activity and this lesson really to progress an inquiry throughout the project, and students have the opportunity at the end to investigate their own questions and experience that open inquiry. So part one was identifying. My students have a general background in force and motion concepts. They identified pushes and pulls, some very basic ideas, but they were not exposed to the terms acceleration or rotation, and I felt like they needed to have a more solid grasp on that before we continued. I also felt like they needed to know more about what the sensor tag is, how it's measuring things, and while my explanation of that was pretty vague on purpose, they were very intrigued by the idea of it, and I think it was good for them to have exposure to this, even though I think them using the sensor tag is a little bit beyond what they're capable of at the first grade level. So I would label this part of the lesson as structured inquiry based on the Bonci and Bell ideas from their article. So part two was investigating. The question was, can your team build some type of ramp for a Matchbox car that will show acceleration and rotation movement? I had exposed them to the sensor tag and tried to display, as the sensor tag is moving, how the accelerometer and the gyroscope react to those movements. And then students were left to design their ramp. So you can see the sketch at the top right corner of this group's ramp, and they came out pretty close to their sketch. The only thing they got rid of was the box. And I labeled this as the guided inquiry stage of the project. So after students tested, they did part three, which was evaluating. Did your Matchbox car accelerate? Did your Matchbox car show rotation? And how do you know? They said yes, the graph went up and as the car went down the ramp. Looking at the sensor tag data from the other groups, how are your results the same or different? What conclusions can you make? This group is talking about a different group that went, and when they went, the car flipped backwards on the ramp, and when we looked at their reading on the sensor tag, the accelerometer trend had done a downward scoop instead of going upward, and this group was very certain that that was because the car went backwards. A lot of students in the class had made the same conclusion. The transition to open inquiry, I asked them what other questions would they like to investigate, and a lot of groups had said, can we make it faster? So they compared each other's ramps and talked about the slope of things and whether that helped. They also talked about what kind of surface the car was driving onto. For instance, some groups had theirs set up on the carpet. Others, like this one, had it set up on the tile, and that obviously made a huge difference because of the friction. So they were able to experiment with that moving forward. Reflecting on this lesson, my students were not really ready for fully open inquiry, and I think that's because I should have built more inquiry opportunities into the entire Force and Motion unit rather than expecting them to do it in this one project with this one concept. I would say this is my first time really intentionally staging it throughout, and I could tell that because my students aren't used to these types of practices, it was a little rough around the edges. One thing I would change already about this activity, I use this rating scale in my handout, how would you rate the activity, and I was really just looking for whether they liked it or not, whether it was something they were interested in, whether they would do it again. Obviously, all the kids were highly engaged. It was Matchbox cars. They loved it. They had fun. Everyone circled the heart eye emoji, but I think I should change it to what did you learn from this? You know, how much learning did you go through for this? And expand upon that more and give them the chance to evaluate themselves and what they learned from this. I think that would be a much more meaningful evaluation at the end. So that's what I learned from this project. Thank you for watching.